You're listening to Business Talk Radio, where we take business to the next level.
Today's show is sponsored by Dr. Jacalyn. Take charge of your life personally, financially, and professionally. Visit drjacalyn.com to book an appointment today.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Rapping with Dr. Jacalyn, the business talk show. I am your host and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and I am a certified life and career coach. With me today is a special guest. His name is Greg Russak, and he is the principal consultant at the Conscientious Capitalist. Let's bring him on. Hi, Greg.
Good morning, Dr. Jacalyn. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
It's my pleasure. And you're joining us from the Pittsburgh area, is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Outside the Pittsburgh area, but grew up here, moved away, came back to raise a family, and still here.
Well, I'm really glad that you can join the program today, especially from Pittsburgh. You've introduced me to some wonderful people, one of whom is from Pittsburgh also. And we met on Lunch Club. And for those who aren't familiar with Lunch Club, it's really a cool networking site that's arranges connections through artificial intelligence. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, that's what I understand. Actually, it's done a really fabulous job for me. Everyone that has been suggested as a connection has turned out to be someone like you, really interesting to talk to and just a good person to have in the network.
And we will mention that we are not paid sponsors. So
That's correct. That's right. I have no vested interest except that it's a great way to get connected to people that you might, for sure, probably wouldn't otherwise be connected with.
Exactly. So especially while we're all sitting at home. So
yeah,
what have you been doing with this time for your business during COVID?
So fortunately for me, I've been in this market long enough, and I've been in the tech community, both in terms of startups and emerging companies, as well as established companies, long enough that I have a fairly good network. But I continue to expand it. And that's how I end up being connected with folks where I might be able to be helpful based on the kind of experience that I have relative to sales and marketing strategies, competitive intelligence, those kinds of things that every business needs to stay focused on, of course. And I really love the startups and the entrepreneurs, the emerging companies who are oftentimes started by people who are really, really intelligent. We've got Carnegie Mellon here, a world-renowned university for lots of things like artificial intelligence and robotics, computer science, those kinds of things. And I meet some of the smartest people in the world coming out of that school, and they want to start a business. And I'm happy to try and be helpful to them when it comes to, again, kind of the business side of things.
Well, you've got a really cool name for your business, by the way.
Thank you.
Can you share with us how you came up with this name, the Conscientious Capitalist?
This is only a 40-minute show, though, right?
That's true.
So where to start? I have always believed that the mission of any business is to provide goods and services that do good, that provide something of benefit and of value. Now, where that benefit and value ends up falling is up to the marketplace to kind of decide what is it that they are looking for, what do they want, what do they need. But through my career, I started out as an engineer, actually. And I tell people this story all the time. I was seduced by the dark side of sales and marketing. But what I brought with me was this engineer's mentality that it's about diagnosing problems and prescribing solutions. That's kind of what engineering is. And I think that's what sales and we'll leave marketing aside for a second, but sales really should be about also. It's a discovery process. It should be a desire to be helpful to someone else and to be paid for the products and services that you have to offer. That's perfectly fine. In fact, it's what keeps things going. The idea of being conscientious about it, though, is where, in my career at least, I've experienced over and over again this notion that you get the sale at any cost. You're willing to do anything to get the order. And that's when from a leadership perspective, from the top down, if that's the direction that you're giving people, more importantly, if that's the culture that you're creating for people, you're going to find yourself in a lot of situations in which you put your reputation at stake. You end up in a situation where somebody is saying something to a prospect that maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they're overcommitting, and maybe they're doing it even unintentionally. But the idea of bringing conscientiousness to this is not about just being a do-gooder. It's about doing good, I think.
I really love that explanation. That makes a lot of sense. So it's looking at the human side of why you're doing what you're doing. It's not just about making the sale, closing the deal, getting the paycheck.
Absolutely. Again, all those things have to happen, right? My motto is how you make money matters. And again, I'm not attempting to try and tell anybody what their values ought to be, because it's going to be all over the place. I'm not even suggesting that there's only one way that capitalism should work. But what I am saying is that capitalism isn't a natural system. It's not an organic system. Capitalism works the way that it does because we choose to operate it in that way. And who's the we? Well, it's the business owners, right? And the people in the C-suites, and the influence that shareholders have over that function of capitalism in our system. And again, I'm not suggesting that there's only one right way to look at this. But from the sales perspective, and again, I come at this again with the engineering and the professional sales approach in a business to business environment, especially not so much consumer oriented. I don't really know a lot about that space, but in a professional setting, in a business to business setting, if the organization from the top is setting the tone that what we do and how we do it is important, and that we shouldn't ever be, number one, wasting our time with somebody who's not really a good prospect. What we should never be trying to do, and this will be controversial for some folks, I guess, we should never be trying to talk somebody into doing something that they don't want to do or don't need to do, more importantly. And that's where when I think about how capitalism can function, and the kind of advice that I give to my clients and to their salespeople, is to be genuine, be authentic, be a problem solver, want to serve others. And you will create not only a better possibility for a more meaningful transaction with that new customer, you will probably have a better chance of keeping that customer for a long, long time, because now they're going to think of you as a trusted advisor and not just a salesperson and not just a vendor. When you're considered a vendor, if that's as good a relationship that you've developed in your B2B business, then that means you're at risk. But if your customers actually trust you, and they know they can get the truth from you, and they know that you won't be looking out for your own best interests first, you'll be looking out for theirs, you'll keep that customer a long, long time. There are people at Fortune 500 companies I've done business with decades ago that are still my friends. They'll still talk to me. And that's not because I gave them a great price. It's not because I talked them into anything. I helped them to solve a problem. And I think that's the mentality that professional salespeople should have.
I agree with you, Greg. Well said. You mentioned a couple of buzzwords, vendor and trusted advisor.
Yeah.
And I remember in Sales 101, there was that pyramid, and at the bottom was the vendor and trusted advisor was the top. And there's a big difference and big distance between those two.
There really is. There really is. And look, I'll say this as well. There's lots of different kinds of businesses, of course. And some businesses are much more transactional in nature, right? If you're in the business of small dollar size transactions but high volumes, it's difficult to create that kind of trusted advisor relationship, individually that way. And I totally get that. As that value of that relationship goes up, that's really when you move from, or at least should be moving from, simply being a vendor who checks all the boxes and is awarded the contract for this year and this year only, and you have to do it all over again next year. Moving up that pyramid, moving towards being someone that your customers will trust even after they've stopped doing business with you, to me, I just get a lot of satisfaction out of having that sense of accomplishment, because I know that even if today's not the right time for us to be doing business together, I'll bet there'll be a time when there is.
And my experience is that when you build these relationships, it's based on trust, and people are actually buying Greg. They're not buying whatever it is that Greg is put a price tag on or is selling, correct?
Well, yeah, to some extent, yes, I would agree with that. And the only qualifier I would add to that is that I think part of the way you develop that trust with somebody is acknowledging that you're not doing it alone. Again, when I think that most of what I talk about tends to be, again, in the bigger ticket, more strategic B2B environment. One person can't do it all. You have a team of experts that are going to help you in many regards, right? And it's important for that customer to know that really, as that point person, that salesperson, the reason you're becoming a trusted advisor is because you're the team leader in many ways. You're the one who's recognizing what is required in terms of resources and bringing the right resources to bear at the right time. And again, this doesn't necessarily apply to a small business that has multiple customers and small volume transactions. But even then, thinking about how you can help someone else and really be authentic about that desire is always going to serve you better than only thinking about how do I make the most money out of this transaction.
It sounds like it's not all about the end game.
Well, I guess, yeah. It almost kind of depends on what you consider to be the end game. If the end game is just the transaction and just the dollars in your pocket today from that sales order, then I think that's short-sighted. If the end game is creating that relationship so that that person, even when you don't know it, is saying good things about you because they trust you, because you put them first, that's a great end game in my mind.
I agree with you. We've got a comment from Mr. Al Cini, who is my co-host on this program we have on Wednesdays. And he writes, trust is key, offering it, building it, and earning it. Fine interview. Thank you so much, Al.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll tell you, Dr. Jacalyn, one of the things that I really get excited about working with younger entrepreneurs is that I don't have any data to back this statement up, but I'll make it anyway. I think young entrepreneurs understand the idea of mission way better than we do, way better than we did. I tell people that, I came of age when the mantra was greed is good. And young people understand that that's not really a great motto to live your life by. It's not even a good motto to run your business by, because we've seen what's happened when that becomes the overriding and driving value behind the organization and most importantly, behind the leadership. You think about companies like Theranos, who literally built billions out of investors with what was a lie, a blood test methodology that turned out to be an absolute scam. Again, those are extreme examples, right? But it gets tempting when times are tough to start feeling like I have to do anything that I have to make it through. And look, I'm not going to try and tell anybody what their values and their morals and their ethics ought to be, but there's only my wife and I raised our kids to understand there's only one person looking at you in the mirror. You have to make up your mind kind of on a daily basis as to who that person is, especially if you're in the profession of sales, and especially if you're trying to market a product or a service that you want people to buy and you want them to keep coming back. You want it to have real value.
All great points, Greg. We need to take a break, but when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit of how you build this culture of humanitarianism or really looking beyond just what the products and services are, looking at the people who are really your greatest assets. So stay with us here, Wrapping with Dr. Jacalyn, special business edition. We're here with Greg Russak, the Conscientious Capitalist. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, my name is Ralph Graves Jr. I'm the host of the Ralph Graves Jr. Show, and I want to invite you to pick up my book, Unstoppable. I wrote a book called Unstoppable. It's 7 universal laws that will transform how you pursue and achieve success. The one thing that my 20 years of law enforcement has taught me is that no matter who you are, we are all governed by universal laws, like gravity. But in this book, we're going to talk about laws like the law of forgiveness, laws like the law of control, the law of intelligent practice, the law of expectancy. I was able to see how those, no matter what their background was, those who identified and treated these laws with respect, they were able to go on and lead successful lives. So pick up this book, and you can go ahead and pick it up at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, RalphGravesJr.com, where anywhere where fine books are sold. Thank you.
There are 7.7 billion people on Earth today. 40% of these people are under the age of 25. Young adults are the most fertile mission field in the world today. In Scripture, we see Jesus pouring his life into 12 young adults who he equipped to change the world and all of history. Like Jesus, we believe that the best approach to reach the world with the gospel is to invest in young, emerging leaders and equip them to build disciple-making movements. Concentric is the notion of surrounding and sharing a common center. Our center is the model and strategy of Jesus for both leadership development and ministry formation. As a global alliance, we provide equipping in biblical leadership based on Jesus' example in the New Testament. Jesus modeled for us how to make disciples that reproduce. Focusing on leadership development is key to creating movements that spread the gospel and Jesus' disciple-making strategy to young leaders around the globe. Our ministry alliance partners are actively equipping leaders and building movements of multiplication that reproduce the life of Christ. Join us today to equip young leaders with Jesus' strategy that will change cities and nations.
The session that we had with BCAT was really entertaining and enlightening. We were able to put together some very specific steps that we as individuals can take, and it was really fun to all come together and see sort of where we're going as a team and how we can all get there together.
We had a tremendous experience with the BCAP partners. One of the challenges that we have as an organization is to make sure that we have the right people in the right chairs doing the right thing. To do that well, you have to have synergy. You can try to dream up ways to make sure that your group does that, or you can rely on experts. We would recommend BCAP partners to anybody who's looking to take their organization to the next level.
Academy Sedan and Limo is a full-service transportation company serving the Philadelphia metropolitan area with full knowledge of the New York City, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. areas. We pride ourselves on being the most dependable, conscientious company in the industry. Our always on-time service and dependable pricing make us the company to call for any event or occasion. Our vehicles can accommodate any size party for any occasion. Our vehicles range from 4-door sedans to SUVs to minivans to limo buses to full-size tour buses and can accommodate groups of 2 to 100. We offer airport shuttle service or over-the-road service without limitation regarding mileage or time, and no drive is too long or too far. So if you find yourself in need of transportation of any type with any vehicle, give us a call at 610-842-4564 and let us show you what a real transportation company can do for you.
Use code ACADEMY2020 to receive 20% off your first 3 rides, including parking and tolls.
Ladies and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
You're listening to Business Talk Radio, where we take business to the next level.
Hi, welcome back to Rapping with Dr. Jacalyn on Business Talk Radio and social media. This is a special business edition here today on Tuesday, and with me is our guest, Greg Russak, the Conscientious Capitalist. Welcome back, Greg.
Thanks, Dr. Jacalyn.
Before the break, I had teed up the idea of talking about how you build a culture of humanitarianism, how you focus on the company's greatest asset, their people. What are your thoughts on this, Greg?
There are a lot of things to take into account and to consider when it comes to creating the kind of culture that is really about service. And there's no shortage of ideas around how to do that, but a couple that have been influential to me is Greenleaf's idea about servant leadership. And oftentimes when people hear that term, if they haven't done a lot of research or reading into it, and look, it's tip of the iceberg kind of stuff for me too. I don't claim to be an expert in this, but what I do know is that experience has taught me that the folks at the top of an organization are the ones who are going to really set the tone. They're really, and that's their responsibility. It's their job to set the vision and the mission. And when it comes to implementation, to really empower the people in the organization to do the things that everyone agrees need to get done in order to realize that vision, or at least to try and bring that vision into reality. What that means is that leaders have to trust their people. Now, there's a lot that goes into getting the right people in place. One of the more influential business authors that I really admire is Jim Collins. He wrote a couple of books, Good to Great and Built to Last. And in these books, Jim talks about getting the right people on the bus and then getting them in the right seats. And what that really means to me is that you can find the right person to come into your organization. You can think that you've got the right spot for them. But if it's not working out and they're the kind of person you want in your organization, as a leader, you don't throw them off the bus. You find the right seat for them. Because great people are kind of rare. If you're happy about the match that person makes to you, to your organization, find a spot for them. And this is so important, I think, especially when it comes to salespeople. I keep kind of going back to this because it is what I feel like I know best, but it's also, I think, it's an aspect that needs an extra level of attention. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Salespeople are the face and the voice of the organization in the marketplace. And it's really important that those people are the right fit for what you're trying to project into that marketplace. And again, it's not about judging whether any one projection of that, your values, your culture is better than another. But the ones that I think tend to last the longest, the ones that people that will admire through good times and bad, are the organizations that have people at the top who put their people first. And they don't just turn things over. Servant leadership isn't about giving everybody the authority to make decisions, but it is about empowering those people to get the job done and then to being there to help them with whatever resource they need. And that resource oftentimes that I think gets overlooked is simply the idea of encouraging the right kinds of behaviors and outcomes and helping them when they struggle. It isn't about always about buying something for them or giving them more training. I mean, all these things are important too, but the servant leader really is there to help that individual and those teams to perform to the expectations. There are expectations. You're not just stepping back and saying, okay, do whatever. It's not an absolute, laissez-faire kind of an approach. You still have to be involved. You still have to be engaged. You still have to lead. But creating an environment in which people trust that you trust them and you allow them to get things done, even if it's not how you would do it, if it's accomplishing the objective, realizing the goal, then I think that's the only way an organization actually grows beyond being a small business that is a tiny group of people that only does the thing that they're capable of doing. There's no scalability to that.
It sounds like when this happens, when you have a culture like this, that's really from the top down, you're creating brand ambassadors. You're creating people who are so so supportive of what the organization's doing that they just want to go out and tell the world.
Absolutely. The best way to get people to be those spokespersons, and even those who aren't paid to do so, is when they feel that sense of community, when they feel that sense of trust, and that they know that it goes both ways. They are going to tell the world how happy they are where they are. When you can kind of tell right away when you talk to someone, if you ask them about what they do for a living and they talk about it as a job, they're probably not thrilled with where they are, what they're doing, and with whom they're doing it. But if you ask somebody what they do for a living and they just bubble up and they're excited, and they can't, and they won't stop talking about it. It'll never be possible, I don't think, to ever see that universally. I mean, let's be real, right? Some people just want to go to work, do their job, come home, and that's great. I mean, you don't have to be a complete zealot. But even in those situations, those people that you are happy to have on the team, you continue to find ways as a leader to make sure that you're serving their needs as well as the company's needs. And one other thing about that I'm really glad to see leaders starting to pay more attention to is who your people are as people. I don't know how it was for you, Dr. Jacalyn, but for me, definitely coming up, you didn't take your personal life to the office. That was kind of taboo. The idea was work and home was home. And, you literally were two different people in two different environments. And I never really understood that all that well, but I'm actually really glad to see over time that norm is starting to be changed, that leaders are recognizing that the people who work for you are not just assets. They're not just a resource for you to use up fully and then replace with a new resource. They are human beings, and you need to care about them as people. That doesn't mean you get too involved in their lives or you go past boundaries that they don't want you to. But I think there's a lot to be said for a leader who authentically and sincerely cares who their people are, other things that are going on in their life that obviously will have an impact on their job performance. It's not on the employee to come to you with that. It's on you as the leader to seek that out. And again, with authenticity and sincerity, to really want to know that person as a person.
Really great points, Greg. I want to ask you something that I noticed during my corporate career. I was always in sales, but the label salesperson at one point, for some reason, was supposedly, a bad title. You don't want to be a salesperson. And all these different titles, even going up to vice president, when I was still in the same role, the same organization, the title changed maybe 4 or 5 times. So is the word salesperson, is that term, is that a bad term?
So you can see me laughing and smiling. Those of you that are on the video. So my wife would tell you that she married an engineer. And if she thought she was marrying a salesperson, she might have given it a second thought. Why is that? Because sales as a profession has not always acted professionally. Every one of us has had an experience in which we have dealt with a salesperson that we could almost immediately tell we couldn't trust. Now, that person themselves, at their core, might have been not a very trustworthy sort of person, okay? And maybe that's why they ended up in a profession where they had this ability and even this power to be able to influence others to serve themselves instead of the customer. But part of that too was leadership. Part of that too is the organization and who those from the top, but especially then into that kind of departmental leadership level, what kind of people are you recruiting? Who are you looking for? Who are the folks that you bring into the organization and want to keep in that organization? And you've been in the same sales profession that I have. I know you've got the same stories I do. I tell people this all the time. I got fired because I wouldn't lie to a customer. I got fired. They let me go because I refused to lie to a customer. Think about that for a second and then realize now that explains, I think, a lot as to why the average person. People in my family still give me grief that I call myself a salesperson because the connotation just is so negative because of the kind of experiences we've had. And that goes back to the people that are involved, both the individual salesperson as well as the leadership in the organization.
I think you touched on a lot of things that many of us in this, in what was my profession, but, seriously, like still today, even though I'm in a different career, I'm still selling myself, right? For people to be guests on the show or be presenters. So I think we have to really change our mindset and realize that the term salesperson shouldn't be conveyed as a negative or thought of as a negative.
And the good organizations I've been in, the ones with great leadership, that people in that company would tell you they were all in sales, and they used to say those things because it was true. They were happy to be a spokesperson for what the organization was doing. And why was that? It wasn't because they were getting a paycheck. It was because they believed in what they were doing. They were proud of what they were doing. They knew that the leadership was guiding them in a direction that had some sort of meaning. And that's how you get people to become free spokespeople and not paid.
And what a difference it makes if you're really passionate about your work, because then it's not a job. It's just part of who you are and just can't wait to do it every day.
Yes. Yeah. And it begins to come so naturally for folks that are, again, when a leader can cast the right kind of vision and can really explain what that vision is, and that vision has meaning. And again, I'm not trying to be judgmental here. Vision and meaning are relative terms to what it is that you're trying to do. But in order to get the right kind of people on the bus, keep them on the bus, maybe move them around in different seats, you have to create that trust. You have to create what Simon Sinek calls, I think, the circle of safety, in which people know that they are in an environment in which they aren't necessarily being managed so much as being led. And there's a big distinction there. I think that, again, oftentimes there are some realities. You do have to manage activities in some businesses. It's not a free for all, and you can't just let everybody do whatever they want. That's not what leadership is about either. But in order for the people in any organization really to perform at their maximum, it's because they want to, not because you tell them to. And how do you get people to get inspired? By trusting them, by giving them enough guidance and direction and autonomy to get things done, and to be there to support them, encourage them, catch them doing good, but also give them advice when they need it if things aren't going the way you think they should.
Your comments reminded me of when I was in corporate America and we had to use Salesforce.com when you mentioned tasks. And I thought it was phenomenal. I loved it, but so many people complained. They felt like they were being monitored and tracked. And it's like, if you're doing your job, then you have nothing to worry about. Put the information in and just do what you're supposed to do. But we need to take a quick break. We're going to hear from Ashley Owens about networking on our next commercial. So stay with us. We'll be right back on Rapping with Dr. Jacalyn.
Networking sucks and people suck at it, but nothing gives me more life than walking around and talking to people in an audience and really being able to identify, okay, I see where you're having trouble, let's work on fixing it. How do you help them? How do you provide value? My goal is to give them those tools to be able to go out and tackle that fear. Anywhere there's coffee is where I'll be. So I bring candy a lot to my speaking engagements. Like, of course that makes sense. I'm a little unconventional.
Ashley was very knowledgeable.
Very entertaining.
I learned a few new things, and to me that's the key.
What do you want them to say? How do you want to be perceived? You're going to get the most direct, tactical tips and practical takeaways when it comes to networking. These two here are super important. You'll remember once the conversation started.
I love the tips that she gave out. I hate networking with a passion, so I feel like I can go through a meeting or event and not feel so uncomfortable.
When you're going to a presentation, you want to be educated. You also want to be entertained.
She was really fun and really personable, and everything she was saying was just very relatable.
She's got a lot of great ideas.
That will make you stand out so fast.
She comes across as someone that likes what they do and just doesn't try to sell you something.
Activity breeds results. If you're not doing anything, you're not going anywhere.
Just made me want to start networking, which I never thought I'd say before.
A networking strategy that works for you.
You're listening to Business Talk Radio, where we take business to the next level.
Today's show is sponsored by Dr. Jacalyn. Take charge of your life personally, financially, and professionally. Visit drjacalyn.com to book an appointment today.
Welcome back to Rapping with Dr. Jacalyn, a special business edition, here with the conscientious capitalist, Mr. Greg Russak. Good to see you, Greg.
Thanks. It's great being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We've had a really good conversation, I feel, about a lot of different topics. What in terms of business is most pressing on your mind today?
So much of that to me is really about identifying what a marketplace really needs, and what people are willing to do to solve their problems, and that's a fairly universal theme. But today there's a lot of external forces at work. Nobody has to be reminded that the last year, not 11 months, I guess now at this point, since March, has been the absolute definition of disruption. And I feel for every business out there, especially those that rely on the consumer as their customer. And these are difficult times. Some organizations and some companies are finding ways to address the need that still exists. There's been lots of and it's an overused term, but I use it anyway, I guess. There's been a lot of pivoting. A lot of companies that I know and have worked with have changed, at least to some degree, if not the direction they're going in, at least the products or services that they provide to recognize that there's a need out there. I think probably everybody has heard about microbreweries, for instance, turning into hand sanitizer producers. It's things like that. But going forward, one of the things that I think is really going to get magnified is the critical nature for leaders to be paying attention to their people as people. I don't know that we'll ever return to anything called normal. And honestly, we could spend more than the show talking about whether we should or shouldn't. But what I really think is the challenge is going to be on leaders to provide the kind of environment and the kind of culture that not only gets the best performance out of their people, but accounts for those people having other things that have happened in their lives, especially in the last year plus, that also ought to be accounted for. If they're the kind of people you want on your team, if you want them in your organization, then recognize that they're more than the 8 to 5 individual that shows up to do a job.
and really look at the human side of the person and what it is that they need before they come to work or before they come into the office. What is it that they need to feel good and feel passionate and feel whole?
And I think one of the misconceptions that maybe gets attached to this idea is that somehow that means the leader ought to give their people everything that they want and that they ask for. And that's not really possible. It's not realistic. But what it really does, for me at least, it signifies that you need to be aware. You need to understand. And again, you need to be sincerely interested in doing what you can to the best of your ability. And honestly, putting those people before yourself. That's what servant leadership is really all about. You put somebody else's needs and wants ahead of yours. It's not easy.
And we can all think, if there has been a time in our life when we worked in an organization where there was a servant leader, we remember that person in a great way.
Absolutely. That there are, we've all, and I'm sure everyone has stories they like to tell. I know I do. There have been people that I've worked for who are no longer with us. I would go back to working for tomorrow. They were that kind of leader. Yeah.
I'd like to pivot right now and talk a little bit about the work that you do as the conscientious capitalist. How do you bring value to your clients?
Thank you for that question. So it really, a lot of it depends on where the client is in terms of their business evolution. If they're a fairly new organization, they're just getting started. They've got some sales, they've got some revenue. They've been doing what I call hero sales. And now they're trying to think about, how do we really scale this thing up? Well, that's the kind of client that I can be really helpful with in turning what they already know about their markets, what they already know about their customers, in creating both a strategy and a process for sales that will help them to at least have the framework by which they can start to pursue new customers without having to do it themselves. The other side of that spectrum could be an established business that has hit a wall, and even worse, his sales have started to decline. And look, it could be COVID related, I get that, but it also could be something that has been trending in that direction for quite some time. Why do things like that happen in a business? Honestly, I think a lot of times it's because the organization itself has failed to adapt as to how customers now decide to do business. You know, in the old days, we were taught lots of prospecting techniques, right, that were all about trying to force our way into a conversation. Nobody ever really reacted all that well to that idea, but we knew we could essentially beat prospects. Actually, I call them suspects, into submission by trying to reach them enough times, right? And look, there's still some of that has to happen. But the organizations that I see being more successful, and this can, again, apply to established businesses who now are trying to figure out why things haven't gone like they'd like them to. So you got to start thinking about how you really engage that marketplace. How have you segmented the market? Who are your buyer personas? How do you map the features and benefits and advantages of what you have to those, not just the market segments, but the buyer persona that are inside? And now start to have, at least attempt to have, an authentic communication or a conversation with those people based on what you've done for others, but also based on the fact that people just, look, right now in COVID, I wouldn't want to be in the commercial real estate business. Nobody's in the office. Whose phone are you going to call? The main number? I mean, yes, the IP phone systems can route it to the right place. I get all that. But reaching people based on what we used to do just doesn't seem like it's the formula that's going to be successful going forward.
And this morning in the news, I was reading about, without getting into politics, about how the social media platforms may one day be gone. And I'm thinking, I don't know if that's a real possibility, but it's in the news today. So we didn't have social media for so long. Now we have it, and so many businesses depend on it or use it. I know right now we're live streaming on 4 different platforms. So what do you think about that?
Well, so one thing that we can always count on is change. The social media platforms that we know today will undoubtedly change over time. And people as kind of markets will move around to different platforms also, right? Some of your customers will be on Facebook and some won't. Some of them will be on some future platform and some won't. I think when it comes to the idea of, again, we're talking now more about the strategic B2B kind of approach, but it has application elsewhere, I think, too. And that is, understand who your customers are to the best of your ability as people, and make that outreach something that doesn't feel creepy, but also accounts for the fact that this is a person who's got a particular job in a particular kind of a business. And based on what we've done for others in that same situation, we think we can help you. And in fact, I've run some numbers and I think I can project an ROI for you. I'll continue to try and reach out to you. And oh, by the way, here are some times when I will call you again. There are lots of different tactics that can be used, and they should be form fitted to the kind of business that you're in. This is why, I've gone through lots of different kind of sales trainings in the past, and every one of them has something to offer. But I get this question a lot. Are you a sales trainer? And the idea is no. I don't take an established set of procedures and say this is what you should do. I've got a whole bunch of experience in different ways of approaching professional selling, but it's important that it be something that fits who you are as a company and fits who you want to project to the marketplace as who you are. And then you can start to make adjustments, once that process is in place and you can see how well it's working.
We've been live streaming your information for how people can get in touch with you. But for people listening on Business Talk Radio, what's the best way to reach out to Greg?
The single one way, best way that connects to everything else is the website. And that URL is theconscientiouscapitalist.com.
And again, what are the services that you offer to your clients?
So it is about sales and marketing strategy and process.
And are there certain demographics or of businesses that you work best with? Small business, medium, large, doesn't matter?
Actually, thank you for that. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. It's the B2B, right? The business to business companies, mostly in the tech sectors. And as a kind of a subset of that, well, not really. I guess it's a separate segment altogether, is the B2E. That's the ed tech companies, the companies who sell to the education markets.
Thank you so much, Greg. You have been an incredible guest, and I really appreciate you being here today. What final words do you have for our audience today?
I think the final word I would leave with everyone is to think of others before you think of yourself. I think that's a good maxim, something I was raised with, I guess you could say, by my parents, and something that I think has lots of room for application in the business world too.
Well, thank you again. I look forward to having you back. In fact, Mr. Cini texted me and he wants to be able to interview you too. So we'll definitely love to have you on our regular show on Wednesdays. And if you'll meet me backstage, I'll be right there. And stay with us.
Thanks so much for inviting.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.
Hey, we're back, and I cut you off, Greg, so I'm really sorry about that. I want to give you the chance to say goodbye.
Thank you. Again, all I was saying was it's been a great honor. I'm really humbled by this invitation. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I loved being here. Thank you.
Please reach out to Greg. He has a lot of valuable information, and you are a really great person. I love your transparency, your authenticity, and also your extensive business background.
Thanks again, Dr. Jacalyn.
All right, I'll see you in a second. And I just want to thank everyone for watching, for listening, and also to let you know that starting tomorrow, we have a brand new platform. We're very excited. It's called A Better You. Lessons from the best coaches, consultants, and trusted advisors. Our show is Wednesdays from 4 to 5:30 and Thursdays from 11 to 12:30. If you would like to be a presenter, you would have 15 minutes to present on a topic that you feel is relevant, that our audience would find value in, and then you become part of a panel. So we have up to 6 people for each of our shows on Wednesday and Thursday. And so you interact as a panelist after you're done your presentation. So we are really excited. We've got a great group for tomorrow. And we also have our regularly scheduled business show at 2 p.m. with co-host Mr. Al Cini. And our guest is Alicia Ramcharatar. And she is a chief drumming architect at Just Add Rhythm. So we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, take care of yourselves, be kind to others, and let's just be grateful for all the things that we do have. See you tomorrow.